Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie, and I am the Executive Director for WEConnect International in Europe, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar. One for all and all for one, what happens if we communicate better in a team? Our presenter today is Pinar Akkaya, Managing Director of Signature Communication, a WEConnect International women-owned business. They specialise in communication training programmes, and during her career, Pinar has worked in many different cultures and industries, such as banking, media, textiles and retail. Now, we all know that teamwork is an important part of success for any business, whatever sector they're in. And whether a company has one core team or several teams based across multiple locations, colleagues are expected to work together to accomplish a common goal. The most effective teams have members who understand themselves as well as each other. And in today's webinar, Pinar will share ways of improving our communication within a team and building relationships that create mutual trust and value. To keep background noise to minimum, our participants will all be on mute, so please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you might have, and there'll be time for discussion and more questions at the end of the session. Pinar's going to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back again, and we will be sharing the slides. So, Pinar, thank you so much today. I'm going to make you present.
Thank you, Maggie. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
I think everyone is hearing me now properly. So I'm delighted to be delivering the first webinar of the year for WEConnect International today, and to be hosting you during this session. And as we're still in January, I wish you all a wonderful new year. So in this webinar, as Maggie has just said, we will explore ways of improving our communication within a team and building relationships that create mutual trust and value. You may be leading a team or may be part of a team. You may as well be working with different teams in your company or organization other than yours. But I believe you all want to have a good communication within these teams. So whatever our position is or however our team functions, we know that the quality of our teamwork is an important part of the success for our business. Teams indeed work together to accomplish a common goal, and good communication is the most important factor that holds a team together and that creates a sense of belonging in its members. So our session will be about 45 minutes, and I will be delighted to have your questions right after. For the moment, may I request you to note down any question you may have during my presentation, or use the chat functionality to send them away so that I can also take a look during the speech. You have probably already received the program of the webinar, but for those who would like to take a quick look again, here are the main points we will cover during this session. I will, in the first place, do a brief introduction to some fundamental concepts and then dwell on the team communication, and I will end up with some practical tips for better communication in a team. So, in the recent years, several studies show that the communication skills are some of the most important skills you need in order to succeed in the professional life. And none of us can say, you know, I do not communicate with anyone, so there's no need for me to use these skills. In many cases, when it comes to business results, how strong your communication skills are becomes even more important than how strong your technical skills are. This is especially valid when you manage a team. Communication skills come at the top of the list for success, along with other soft skills like empathy, high emotional intelligence, ability to work with others. We talk to people, we listen when people talk to us, we write emails, reports, we read the documents, we comment back. So when I say communication skills, I'm talking about communication in a larger sense, not only verbal communication. That includes written communication, making presentations, listening, making an impact, and convincing others. If you want to be an expert communicator, you need to be effective at all points in the communication process. And you must be comfortable with the different channels of communication. So when you communicate well, you can be very successful. As an ex-HR director, I have been witness to this many times in my career. And many individuals are unable to communicate their thoughts and ideas effectively, be it in speaking or in writing. And this has a tremendous effect on their career improvement. They usually have trouble developing their careers beyond a certain point, and sometimes even despite their high potential in other areas, like technical areas. So before we go any further, let us see how communication works. What you see on the slide is how communication is explained in an academic environment, in its simplest form, of course. Well, I'm the one who added the illustration, but here how it goes. Communication is a process that involves at least two people. You see the two ladies on the picture. There's a sender and a receiver, and then finally there's a message that needs to be transmitted. For the communication to be successful, the receiver must understand the message in the way that the sender intended. Well, I think it sounds simple, doesn't it? But I'm sure you have seen many situations where it doesn't happen that way. There are misunderstandings, confusion, communication errors, and they often cause big problems. So getting your message across is very crucial in communication. Now, when we are in a team, things become slightly more complex. There are several people and often several messages at every moment during the day. The way we send these messages changes as well. We use different means. Communication is complex enough when it is one-on-one, but in a team it requires even further effort. Okay, so far with the notion of communication, let us now take a moment to explore the team aspect of our topic. During all our life, we all have been in different teams. At the school, in a sports team, in a performing arts team, or in a project team. Teams are an undeniable part of the business life as well. They work in different tasks and projects. They have a common objective, and they work towards this common objective, a target. From small to large, teams are composed in different ways and different people, and they are everywhere. Well, so far, that sounds simple. That sounds simple, yet we all know that in real life, this is often not the case. In many cases, teams suffer from communication problems that prevent them from functioning properly. They pay this off really expensively, as the consequences can directly hit their reason of existence, their mission, and their end results. If you remember the title of our session, back to our title for this session, so what happens when we communicate better in a team? There are several positive impacts, and I'm sure there are lucky people among us today who have worked in a well-communicating team and enjoyed those positive impacts. Now let's take a closer look. When there's a good communication in a team, the efficiency of the team increases. They obtain better results, working more cleverly, and using the time and their energy more efficiently. They are more focused. Also, the synergy increases. They can achieve more in less time and with less effort. They can invest their time and effort to things that create added value. They are not limited by the number of people working in the team, but rather they focus on the results they obtain. These teams are also more creative. They are able to voice different ideas. They are nurtured by different perspectives that they welcome without prejudice. They use conflict not to divide, but to explore different paths, to discover new ways. And one of the best possible outcomes is the fact that the members of these teams build trust in each other. They have strong bonds and a strong sense of loyalty, not only for the company they work for, but also to each other. So this provides a safe and secure and enjoyable working environment. And here comes one of the magic words that help teams create wonders, so it's engagement. Engaged people speak more positively about their company, they stay longer, and they spend real effort to find solutions to the problems they encounter. So in line with engagement, these teams discover the joy of working together, bringing them fulfillment and higher job satisfaction. So a lot of advantages when you communicate better in a team. Well, finally, these teams see the big picture more easily, and they can find meaning in what they do. I will refer here to the wonderful book of Daniel Pink regarding the motivation. He says that the employees are motivated by autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'm sure there are people who read it among you. The autonomy, that is when they can decide on their own. They take initiatives. Mastery, that is when they become experts in what they do. and purpose, finally, that is when they can associate their own work with the big why of their doing this work. So I guess what I have mentioned here are the dynamics that we will all welcome gladly in our team, aren't they? I'm sure they are. But allow me to mention something else, which is equally more important. We're living in an era that is not anymore like our parents. Things change, and I guess you will all agree with me that they continue to change in a mind-blowing speed. And the teams today are not the teams of yesterday. They can be found in many forms. They can be under the same roof. They can be scattered in different parts of the country or even in the world, sometimes with time differences. I call them the teams where the sun never goes down. They can be virtual, and that is the teams that only function through virtual means but still responsible from delivering outcomes and business results. They are temporary teams gathered together for a specific project or a mission. Often they are also other teams and other responsibilities they are in touch with alongside with this one. And finally, there are teams with no hierarchical structure, no titles, no leaders, and they are self-managing. I'm sure among those who listen to me now, there are all of these. I'm saying this because I'm particularly excited to know that today in this session we're around 60 people coming from 12 different countries in the world. So sure, all these different models have different impacts on our communication, and more importantly, they require different communication approaches. For example, when a team is under the same roof, verbal, paraverbal, and nonverbal factors communications are present. So just to make it clear, when I say verbal, I mean the words we use when transferring the message. And the paraverbal is the tone of our voice, our pitch, the speed of our words. And finally, the nonverbal, you might know, as you know, the body language and the gestures, including our mimics. So when there's distance among the members of the team, often they communicate verbally, but the paraverbal stays limited, and as the means of communication are often not face-to-face. There's almost no nonverbal that completes the meaning and the flow of communication. When there's a virtual team, almost always they use technological means, and they have rarely the opportunity to get together, which limits both paraverbal and the verbal, the nonverbal. So communication is more than just talking face-to-face, and although this is very important, but different circumstances may require different types and means of communication. Today, for example, technology plays a big part in the way we communicate, and when used effectively, it can save time and help us work more efficiently. So ask yourself what the most frequently used type of communication in your team is, and I'm sure the answer will be important from a team communication perspective. These new ways of working have not only impact on the team communication, but also on team performance. As you will remember, the impacts of good communication we covered a couple of slides ago. So this is why the good communication becomes even more important in today's business environment. But how are we going to become good communicators? So that's the essential point. To start with, the people whom we admire for being fantastic communicators, and there are people like that, have some common points. It is not secret, and the good news is that if you work on these points, it is perfectly possible to develop and become good communicator. As it is always the case, the first step is always being aware and then work on these skills to develop them. Let us now look at the 4 typical characteristics of good communicators. So 2 of these characteristics, the green one over there and the purple one, are the ones discovered by Richard Bender and John Grinder, the creators of NLP.
Ben de bir ilaç olur, bir şey olur ona.
While working on the communication, Bandler and Grinder discovered that some people were naturally good communicators, who were able to pass their messages perfectly, create impact on others, and build relationships. They made an in-depth study afterwards on those people and discovered that these people have 2 common traits. The first one was the PR that you see on the green square over there. That stands for presence. So a good communicator is always present when she communicates with people. She watches the person across her with full attention, tries to understand the impact of her words and her message using all the elements. How the person's face is changing, any clues with the body language, the color of the skin, the micro movements in the person's face. So this is also called calibration in NLP language, if there's people among us who are interested in NLP. They also make the person feel valuable, concentrating fully on the person and nothing but the person. The second characteristic is the SY that you're seeing on synchronization. This is the second one from Bender and Grinder. The good communicators mirror people they interact with. This is actually a natural process, mirroring people, and it helps people to feel closer to each other. So when we like someone, we start to mirror his behavior as well, and the reverse is also valid. As soon as we start to mirror the person's behavior, we also increase our chances to like each other and communicate better. The third characteristic is the self-awareness, which is the red box here. A good communicator is aware of her own emotions, knows what she feels and why she feels that way. She's also aware of her capabilities, limits, and her values. She knows herself well, values her qualities, and this brings along, of course, the confidence, which has great impact on how the person communicates. So finally, the good communicators are impactful. They are charismatic individuals. People notice and remember them. They are strong but approachable. This is what makes charisma, actually, the two dimensions, being strong and being approachable. They make an influence on others as a whole, not only with what they say, but the way they behave, their appearance, their voice, and their warmth. Being a good communicator was also closely related to being able to understand ourselves and others, what dynamics make us behave and communicate in a specific way, what are our motives. So for those who think now, I wish I had a tool to be able to understand how people communicate, I would now like to give a practical tool which will help you better understand both your way of communication and those you communicate with. So this is a simple model you can apply in your daily life, and I will now talk about this model in a general way. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I believe it's going to give you an idea and then enough information to use it in your daily life. So according to the model, for any person to communicate in a certain way, that is to develop an individual communication preference, there are two main dimensions. The first one is sociability that you see on the vertical axis, and the second one is assertiveness that you see on the horizontal axis. So as you see, the model proposes 4 general styles based on how sociable and how assertive a person is, depending on the person's behavioral and personality traits. So we all use these styles more or less, but it turns out that we use 1 or 2 of these 4 styles a lot more comfortably, hence I call them preferences. There's also one that we feel more uneasy to use, and this is probably the least one that you're using while communicating. It is useful to know which one you use more dominantly in order to become more efficient in our relationships with others, and also to understand them better and communicate better. So let's see these styles one by one now. The first one is the one with low sociability and low assertiveness. We call it the reflective style. Those are the people who are usually calm. They like to think before taking a decision. They enjoy being alone. They like to think before they express any ideas. They are usually in no rush. They control their feelings well, and they don't show their emotions easily. They seem to be hard to approach and hard to get close. They plan ahead. They would like to stick to their plans. They prefer order in their life, and they are typically meticulous, disciplined, and hard workers. The second one is the one with high sociability and low assertiveness. We call it the supportive style. Usually these are the people who like to work with people. They enjoy collaboration. They are patient and careful to details, especially when they take decisions. So they do not like being under the spotlight, those people. They're very good listeners, though, and they also do not like to use or show power. They prefer good ways of convincing people in a friendly manner. They are usually warm people. and they touch people's hearts while they talk, while they express their opinions. You may think they are quiet and introverted. They do not look anxious, and they usually get along well with others, the supportive people. The third one is the one with high sociability and also high assertiveness. We call it the emotive style. They show a lot of emotion and enthusiasm when they talk. They energize people when they speak. They express their emotions easily. They're extroverted people, and they enjoy being with other people. So they're active, they like to move. They're often the ones who do the first move. They use a lot of gestures when they're talking. They use the informal you a lot, and they quickly switch to name basis when they meet new people. They're also very convincing and express their ideas enthusiastically. And finally, we have the director style with the low sociability and high assertiveness. These are the people with formal behavior, high self-esteem. They look serious, and they can express strong opinions about things and people. They sometimes insist on their ideas. They may seem like enjoying to control everything. They look busy, and often we think that they are not good listeners. So they do not look like they are very sensitive towards others, and they do not appear like warm people like the reflectives or the supportives. Now, I wonder if you were thinking of people around you while I was covering those 4 styles. In real life, there are sometimes people around us who reflect perfectly the characteristics of each style. So I'm not going to be surprised if you were thinking of people you know while listening to me. However, remember that there is no right way or best style among those 4. So each style has its own strengths and weaknesses. Each style brings advantages in a particular situation. I also would like to remind you that this is only general guidance, and you may see that people switch to different styles depending on different circumstances. So that's normal. However, what might be useful is to look around you, try to understand people's dominant style that they use in the general life, and then more dominantly, more frequently. And to do that, it is enough to observe how assertive a person is and how sociable a person is. Once you have these 2 dimensions clear, you can always see which of the 4 styles a person dominantly uses. You'll be able to put the person in one of the styles as a user of this style dominantly. So once you do that, you can use this model effectively in your communication with others. In the next slide, I'll tell you how to use it. Well, learning these 4 styles and your own dominant style will help you manage the situations you come across more eloquently. We call it flexing, and there are 2 ways of doing it. The first one is increasing your versatility. I don't say here that you should completely change your dominant style, but from time to time, you can make use of other styles depending on the situation you come across. You can become like in a way, the Swiss Army knife, making use of a particular style, which may turn the situation into your advantage in communication. So we're actually all capable of adapting ourselves to many situations. We just need to see the need, and then we have to be willing to switch our style. The second way of flexing is to build bridges. And what I mean by this is the following. If your relationship with a particular person is important for you, you can make an effort to adapt your way of behavior to that person's way of behavior. So by this way, you can manage this relationship better, as well as the results you will have out of this relationship. So building bridges starts with, of course, understanding this person's needs. What does she want? What is at stake for her? Let me give you an example around this. So let's take the example of a person who has a directive style, and your dominant style is supportive. The director is, as you just heard, very result-focused, whereas you, as a supportive profile, you are more emotion and relationship and people-oriented. So as a supportive, you may think that the director is not very kind and too direct in his messages. You may end up feeling bad, and you may start to see the communication between you two is not so good. Meanwhile, the director does not focus on your efforts to become closer and to build a relationship, and he or she thinks that it is useless to spend time on small talk and on things that are not business related. So the director may also see communication go in the wrong direction, which leads to an even more difficult situation in your relationship. However, when you understand that the person across you has a director style as a dominant style, you can find ways to flex to him and make the most of this relationship to avoid hurdles. As we talk about communication, please allow me to open a quick parenthesis here and tell you about the importance of understanding the perceptions around your team. So there are two dimensions to see this. First of all, what the perception about your team within your team is, and what the perception about your team for people who are outside is. Both are very important, and they may give you important clues for improvement in communication. Here's a practical tip to understand. This is actually a mini pulse check that you can do at the end of a meeting or as a team activity. Give each member of your team a post-it and ask this simple question. What would be the 3 words or adjectives that you would describe for our team? What would describe our team for you? You can do this anonymously without any names on post-its, depending on your team culture. Then collect all the post-its and open publicly and read aloud these adjectives people use to describe your team. Are you surprised? Are you pleased? Are you disturbed by what you hear? A short discussion on the outcomes is always useful, why we are perceiving our team like this. And you can do a similar exercise to understand the second dimension as well, that is, you can try to see the reputation you have built as a team, using others' perspectives, others' ideas, using the same exercise. And I usually like to say this, to see your aftertaste. What's your aftertaste as a team? What do people tell about you when your team or your team members are not there? For good communication, what a team understands by being a team is also very important. What's their awareness level? Let me be more clear here. A group of people who work together may not be a team in the sense that we use so far. So they can as well be individuals working in this team, but having different objectives, acting independently, instead of navigating towards the same goal. It is not difficult to understand when you see a group of people working together who are not a team. There might be several reasons for that. And as of today's topic, communication problems can be one of the core factors for this situation. So the end result is, of course, often a group of people who could not become a team, rather a group of separate individuals working each in their own corner. And if this is the case, this is the very point to start to work on. Now I will approach the end of the session with some practical tips that I believe will help you to become a better communicating team. Well, these tips are there to facilitate your way to a healthier communication style and to improve the engagement and trust in your team. To improve the communication in the team, first and foremost, we need to improve on a personal level. Each member of the team is responsible to do this, and here are some ways to ensure this personal improvement. First of all, it is essential to speak with good intentions and be watchful of the message you want to send across. What is your intention? What do you want to do by the words you communicate? And it's always useful to be concise and very open. So what I mean by listening with your heart and mind is to understand what the person really says and how he feels or she feels at the moment. When we have good listening skills, you not only hear what is being said, but you listen to the whole message. And this also helps the others express themselves better. So when you need to listen, make sure you're prepared, you ensure that the things in your environment not distracting you. Also, do what you can to put the person at ease. You can give the person your full attention so that you can understand also the nonverbal elements of their message. To take your listening skills to the next level with active and empathic listening, you can also use silence. It is very strong in communication, the moments of silence in terms of listening to people and opening people up towards more open communication. Always useful to dig deeper when you communicate. Ask questions, I think you can benefit from learning different questioning techniques to get more information from people and to get more clear messages around what they want to communicate. And as we have discussed during the 4 styles model, flexing your communication style according to the person may help a lot, which is so that one size does not fit all. So don't keep your style unchanged. Play with it, develop it over time. SOAP is one little abbreviation that has been very useful for me in my life. It stands for soft on people, hard on points. So when delivering a message, when saying something, make sure that you say it kindly but firmly. Even in moments of stress, do not attack the person. Many people do that. Just be firm and clear around what is possible and what is not possible, but do not mix the person and the message you want to get across. There's always a way of formulating your message using SOAP, and this is very, very life-changing. 2 final points around this are to pay attention to your own boundaries and the other person's boundaries. That means your red lines. These are often linked to your personal values, and there's nothing that annoys us more than the conflicts and the things that conflict with our values. So before you bring the communication up to that point, to a very negative point, be watchful of mutual limits. Good communication skills require a high level of self-awareness and awareness of others. After the improvement at the personal level, I would like to take a moment to talk about team success. And there's a common belief that a common practice in people management, we detect the strengths and the weaknesses of the individuals, and we ask them to work on the weaknesses in order to develop these weaknesses. Almost every performance appraisal is around these themes. We talk about strengths, we talk about weaknesses, and then we try to find the ways to develop the weaknesses. Nonetheless, a team is a wealth of skills, competences, knowledge, and strengths. And we usually disregard this with the focus of developing the strengths, the weaknesses. So we can always prefer to focus on each person's strengths and to have them leverage the whole team with what they have and they're already capable of. In communication, using the right means is also critically important. You may want to think about the message you want to communicate, the type of audience, your objective, the circumstances, and the nature of the message, and even the cultural context of the situation. So every project that comes through your door needs handling in an exclusive, in an individual way. If a task requires a hands-on approach, a face-to-face meeting might be better for effective communication. If your team members are in different locations, technology comes in, you can benefit from various online resources to meet up. I'll come to email here because emails are a fast way of communication, but they're often not ideal to discuss ideas and decide on critical things. It's a wonderful way to send a quick message, maybe some files, but it is not necessarily the best route to a quick reply. So when you work in geographically diverse teams, because of the time differences, emails are super efficient. You can record and store some information, which is also an advantage. But from a confidentiality perspective, you need to be careful. And moreover, the moment you hit the send button, you cannot control who will read it. Also, email is not very personal, and it is not a very effective way when you need to communicate sensitive information that requires a personal touch. And in some cultures, we definitely prefer email when we have a hard message to pass, which is definitely a mistake to do. You can also call a person or video call a person, which is more personal than sending an email, but not as close as the face-to-face. So it is a two-way communication. It's a more efficient way of an idea exchange. So I would suggest to use the phone when you feel the written communication is not adequate, or when you need an immediate answer or a fast decision when a situation requires explanation or clarification. A final point for the general tips will be around competency development. Communication is a skill and it can be developed. So in that sense, training teams on communication is always a good idea, and it is well worth the investment. Communication training is often overlooked, so I'm sorry to say this as a communication trainer, but it helps to improve team communication and consequently the quality of your work, and that's very important to invest in training programs. I'm also looking at the time, and I will conclude our session with 15 practical tips that you can start applying immediately. So right after this session, you can pick one or two and start working on them with your team. It is important to set the rules of the game together with your team. Discuss what kind of team you are and what your ground rules are. If you agree upon these rules, make sure everyone follows them, and that's very important. Be as low context as possible. This may sound new to you, to some of you, what low context means. It means to be as clear as possible in your communication, to say what you mean what you say, without leaving room to read between the lines. In some cultures where the communication is high context, like Asian cultures, French culture, Turkish culture, this may not be a very easy thing to do for many people. However, if you're in a multinational environment, if you're in a team where there are many different nationalities, being low context in your communication is a big, big help. When people see the team physically, they have a stronger sense of belonging. So physical proximity is an important factor from a team communication perspective. Make use of your shared space. Try to open your doors. Try to be visible and whole as a team, be visible as a whole team as well. We've discussed about this earlier. I will just say that regarding the building bridges, you should not miss an opportunity to build a bridge in your team. So if you see an opportunity to build a bridge, to use a flex strategy, go ahead and do that. And the fifth point is usually not something we do automatically or naturally. People get closer and do communicate better when they work together. They discover being a team even though they have never thought that they could work closely with a particular person in team, maybe sometimes due to individual differences in their cultures or their personalities. However, these people can end up having great results. Choose people with different communication styles to work together, and you may benefit from the synergies they create. The sixth one is about the communication barriers. Often the jargons, the abbreviations, semantics, past references, noise in the workplace, or technical difficulties end up being communication barriers that prevent us from exchanging effectively. So if you see any of these, start by removing them and increase the quality of your team communication. In many cases, the newcomers in the team try to make it to the team with their own effort. Some can't, well, some can because they're more extroverted, they can build more relationships very easily. But I would suggest to be proactive on that and to be inclusive from the first day onwards towards the newcomers, telling the newcomers about the new team, their team, the people, the business, as much as you can, include them actively in the team's daily routine. That will facilitate the things and the communication. One of the biggest problems that affect a smooth communication is the fact that we very fast become unavailable due to heavy workload, daily routines, and well, the new era does not help either. So deciding on an availability rule helps a lot in terms of receiving the right information at the right time and be able to communicate on these on time. So be reachable and let everyone in the team be so. Delaying communication issues and conflicts and avoiding to discuss about them on time can become also a big problem in team communication. So use hop and dare to discuss even the most challenging matters in the team. If you're open and use this approach, this will settle as a culture in the team, and I think it will be a precious asset for your team. In line with this, I will also underline the importance of creating a feedback culture. But giving feedback is not often a natural thing for us, and more importantly, it is a skill that we need to learn. Learn different methods of giving feedback and watch for the right time to give feedback and ask for permission, as it may not be the best time for the person you want to give feedback. It's a two-way street, and then you always have to cooperate with the person when you give feedback to make it efficient, to be useful to the person. The final set of 5 for my practical tips start with speaking up. Having the culture of open communication is one of the best assets that you may have. If your team cannot do this naturally due to maybe some cultural reasons, you can trigger it by using methods like the devil's advocate, For example, choosing one person to play the devil's advocate in meetings, whose role is to object the ideas with different arguments. And because you're separating the person from the role, usually it is more easy for a person to play the devil's advocate, hence to voice different opinions rather than being herself and object the opinions. A good habit is to add because and how to your conversation. When you say something and do not give the reason for it, neither an idea on how the person can improve, the person is usually left in the dark. But if you develop the habit of using because and how, your message will be a lot more clear. And for example, you can say, well, I'm saying this because, and you can give your reasons. And you may think of doing this, again, you can give your reasons, you can give some advice. And if the person is willing to buy this advice or to use this advice, it will be to your advantage. And you can improve in that. We're lucky to live in this era where the technology is easily reachable and affordable by many of us, especially when working in geographically diverse teams. So try to find the best tools that may help you and that may facilitate your team communication. Some of the tools I use, for example, are groupmaps.com. This is an online brainstorming platform that you can use even with people who are in different geographical areas. I use virtual meeting rooms where I can see people. I use BlueJean, an online conference tool. I use AppearIn on the mobile to get connected to people instantly and to see their face when I'm exchanging with them. There are many others, but it is well worth the effort. Two final points are the most important, the 14 and the 15. One of the reasons why the team communication fails is the fact that people are limited to their roles only. They do what they need to do, but they are not inspired and they do not go the extra mile. So if you give them vision, clarity, and meaning, and if you make sure that they understand what they do, how it changes the company, it will have a great impact on them and their way of approaching work. So that's very important. And finally, find your team's why. A key question to ask is why you exist at all as a team. Finding your why, as Simon Sinek says, is a great way of engaging people and being open to new discoveries. This may sound, I know, a little bit philosophical to some of you maybe, but a discussion around your team's why may bring great inspiration. And one final tip before I end the session: if a team gets on well, they will automatically communicate better. So when and if you give people in your team the opportunity to get to know each other better, it will help to create an environment where everyone feels better and feel more engaged. The more informal, the better. This will give people the opportunity to show their true self, leaving their business persona behind. In that sense, social gatherings are an essential way of creating proximity in a team. So increase face time by means of creative ways, depending on your team's culture, your team's needs, and what they like to do, and enjoy being a well-communicating team. This was what I wanted to share with you today. I hope it was useful. I thank you very much for being here and for listening. I think we can spare some minutes. I have, as far as I see on my screen, we have about 15 minutes to go. I'll be very happy to answer your questions.
Pinar, thank you so much for sharing all of that information. You've covered a lot of ground in 40 minutes, so that's fantastic. I had a question which you answered just towards the end, which is about the tools that you would recommend for good community. Would you be able to share a list? I kind of scribbled some of them down, but would you be able to share a list of some of the tools that you use, and I can email them around to
with great
us, because I think that's so many different platforms you could use.
Yeah. With great pleasure, Maggie. I'll be very happy to send you some of the tools that I'm using.
And what's affordable, because some of them can be quite any top tips on kind of cost-effective solutions, that would be great.
Yeah, gladly. Many of them have different options to use. So the more you need, the more you can increase the way you're using it. But many of them are already cost effective, they're affordable, and most of all, I think they're very efficient. So I believe many of the people who listen to us now will make use of those. So I will gladly share some of those tools that I'm using in my everyday life.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, if anybody does have any questions that they'd like to ask Pinar, please do use the chat functionality. That would be really great, and we can go through them. I've got just a couple of others from almost from a WeConnect perspective. We're a really virtual team, and because of the budget constraints, we are very rarely all together. And indeed, as new people come on board, you know, there's not the option to kind of do formal onboarding or anything like that. A lot of this prep around getting your teams in a good place, around understanding everybody's communication styles, are there any advice as new team members come in, and how you then, without having to do a whole formal session with the whole team, how you integrate new staff into the existing structure?
Gladly. I think the virtual teams are a reality of our era. So basically, the networks or the structures like WeConnect typically, or many other structures who are similar, do not have a chance to be under the same roof, and this is the nature of their structure. And I think here, this is where technology comes in. You can benefit a lot from the visual tools that the technology creates. And then you can use, instead of emails, you can use the importance or the priority of the emails rather than or rather switch to many visual technological tools that will be at least able to show you the face of the person, the mimics, at least part of the paraverbal, and maybe part of the nonverbal as well. You can also assign a mentor to the person who comes in, the newcomer, who will preferably be in a different country, so that they can also get enriched by different cultural perspectives. This person may be the one who will connect the newcomer to others in the WeConnect network, help the person find his or her way into the WeConnect world. So I think using a person as a mentor, or also as a bridge to the WeConnect world, or to any structure that you're working, is very important. We call it the catalyst in those structures. So there's someone when it's needed, and there's someone if I have to ask a question. So a mentor would be good. A visual tool, technological tool might help a lot. You can create occasional fun occasions, to gather together, not to use the technology only for business purposes, but also for fun and social purposes. And this is perfectly possible in this era.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, the idea of doing something, we certainly only use anything for work. There's never anything social. So I've got a couple of questions that have come in from the participants. Rachel Wade has asked, she was with a client recently, and they had two people in that team. She's put this in inverted commas, that they hated each other, and one would reach out, but the other just did not participate. Do you have any top tips on how you deal with that scenario where there's really negative, a really negative scenario?
Person. In many of those cases, I think finding this person's why, and usually the needs of that person is the key to enter to the secret zone, which leads to some problems. Usually people do not act positively or create problems because their needs are not addressed. So what might be this person's need? And what might be the reasons, the motives behind this behavior. I think being an open communicator always helps. So basically, not giving feedback, not trying to correct the behavior, but really like inviting this person to an open exchange zone would help. Because as soon as you discover the needs of that person, you will start to find out what is really causing this behavior in the end, because the behaviors are the tips of the iceberg. There's well underneath something that causes this behavior, and I would probably start by digging this very reason, and it's usually a need.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. And then we've got another question from Katie Beaton, who's asking, what would you advise as being the most important communication skills to instill when you're building a startup organization? So in terms of creating that culture and processes, what are maybe a couple of key things that are top of your list?
Mm-hmm. By definition, I think the startups, being be it a small or a big operation, they all face a very high level of ambiguity. I would start from the recruitment first of all, because some type of person is really suitable for a startup. The one who is very comfortable with ambiguities, unclarities, maybe motivated by what is unknown. So I think the type of person you integrate in a startup also draws the line where you will end up with in terms of team communication. Other than that, I think the startups have the luxury of being small structures, and they benefit a lot from more frequent communication between the members. So that's very important. They're usually more informal, and you can also benefit from this informality in terms of accessing very easily to each other. So that's very important. Startups are also, I think, the kernel where you could set your team rules, as I have just said during my presentation, in the very beginning. So what is the culture we want to settle in this team from the day one, and what is the way we're behaving? What are our set of rules of communication? So I think they're ideal, and often during the rush of creating a startup, we don't stop and then take time to discuss all these issues. And you're growing the team, you're trying to grow the business, but meanwhile you're growing a team over there. So I think it is very important to stop, despite the fact that it's a very high energy operation, I know, to stop and take a moment to discuss about the teams, the needs of the teams, the way we're going to communicate, and our rules of the game. And definitely I would take some time to discuss about this with the presence of all the members. Hello? Hello? Well, I can see a couple of video screens on, so if you hear me, if you could slightly nod and give me a sign, I'll be very happy.
Yeah.
I see Rachel. Thank you very much, Rachel. Yeah, lovely, Karen. I hear you. And I see Noreen as well. Nodding, thanks a lot for the sign. Well, I think we can we hear you, Maggie?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I just had myself on mute and I was just asking a question. Karen had asked a question about the DISC practitioner, and I just wondered if you knew anything about that and if you might be able to answer a question about the difference, your model about that sociability versus assertiveness, and then DISC profiles.
Yeah, I can. I'm a certified DISC trainer or trainer, so I can compare both. The DISC is based on Jung. So basically it works on two aspects, which is extroversion and introversion, and thinking and feeling. That means as opposed to sociability and assertiveness, it uses different dimensions. They're very similar in that sense, I think. They both address, how the assertiveness may be very similar to, in that sense, extroversion and introversion in a way, which is maybe not very clear, but I find that this is a more detailed way of understanding the behavioral preferences. The model I presented is an indicator of communication preferences, and often it is limited by the communication preference of the person, whereas with this, you can find many different aspects of a person's behavior. So I would say this would be a more sophisticated tool, which requires maybe an online profiling usually, and usually you don't have the luxury of doing this to every person you come across with. So instead of that, I prefer today present this model, just also having in mind that when you look at the person, you can easily think about the two aspects, and then you can figure out what's the dominant communication style of the person is. But otherwise, I find them very, very, very much parallel with each other.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I was saying I know that Karen's a practitioner as well, so thank you for sharing. Let's see. I don't know if there's any other questions that have come in. A few people have sent things to me directly, but I think we've covered all of them. I'm just going to scroll back through, but I think we've covered everything. And we're pretty much nearly on the hour. So unless anybody, if anybody else has got any other final questions, please do use the chat functionality. And if there's anything that you'd like to ask Pinar directly, her email is listed on the slides, which I'll be sharing afterwards. So you're very welcome to get in touch with Pinar directly, and you can check out their website and all the different work that all the communication training that Signature have got going on. So, Pinar, I just want to say thank you very much for sharing your expertise and for answering all of those different questions. And if anybody would like to get in touch, then your contact details are all
Thank you very much, Maggie, to you and to WEConnect International for this.
Very welcome. Thank you for tuning in. And as I said, we'll be sharing the recording and sending it around.
Yeah, and thank you very much for all the participants to be there and then to listen. It was very lovely to have you, to feel that you're at the end of the line, so thanks a lot.
Great. I had a number of comments that had come through, people saying that they'd enjoyed it and that they thanked you for sharing your time, and yeah, it had been a very useful session. So, and a couple of requests also for the list of tools. So that's really great. So if you ping them over to me, and then we can share them afterwards. So that's great. Well, thank you everybody. Thank you, Pinar. Thank you to all of you. And I will look forward to having you join us at our next webinar. Thanks very much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.